Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Chris Bonney from Gulo Solutions, and we are a digital agency that builds websites and also offers digital marketing services like search engine optimization. I'm super excited to be sharing this webinar with the great folks at Pragmatic Digital. Scott and Susan are voice experts. They have over 20 years of experience in digital and marketing, and their focus really is on voice. So for those of you wanting to know what the next steps for your brand or your company and voice are, well, these are the people to talk to. The goal for this website is twofold. One is, first, Scott and Susan, they're going to make the case for voice. I mean, it is truly something that is here, and you'll see by the time they're done, it's something you should be considering and actually probably budgeting for in real time. Then I will go out into the wild, and I'm going to talk to Google Assistant, and I'm going to talk to Alexa directly and just show you how tightly connected your web SEO, okay, so the search engine optimization that you're doing for your website or lack thereof, is affecting how people are learning about your brand or your company or your association, okay, over smart speakers and other ways. And in many cases, you actually might be surprised at how it all works. So to be clear, we're focusing on how your website affects how people learn about you over voice search, okay? Just a couple quick housekeeping things. I just wanted to let everyone know we will be emailing everyone a copy, a link actually to a copy of these slides tomorrow. So, look forward to that email tomorrow to get the slides and more. If you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and drop them in the Q&A section here in the webinar, and we'll try to get to them at the end. I think we will have time at the end to answer a few of them. Also, stick around to the end. Scott and Susan are very generous. They're offering a report that they worked very hard on with some statistics around voice. It's just hugely valuable, so you'll want to stick around to get that link. So, well, listen, we've got a ton of content to cover today, so I want to get right to it. So, Susan and Scott, I'll hand it over to you for the first part of the webinar today.
Great, thanks, Chris. So before we dive in too far, want to talk about what is voice, and let's talk about what that means. A lot of people, when you think about voice, think about the speaker that is Amazon Alexa or Google Assistant. But in reality, when we're talking about voice, we're talking about any interaction that allows you to control a computer program using natural speech. So that opens things up quite a bit. And it also includes your smartphone. Siri being one of the first assistants that is accessible off your phone, but there's also Google Assistant that lives off of your Android phones, and also things like your Comcast remote, or even in some cars like your Tesla car or any of those pieces. So anything that is triggered by voice is what we're talking about as we're talking about the different ways to interact. So it opens things up quite a bit. So now that we've talked a little bit about the terms, we can talk about what makes voice compelling. And why is voice so, why is it taking the world by storm? And part of it is because it is that eyes-free, hands-free experience. It lends itself to multitasking. But more excitingly, it is this natural language piece. The technology is learning from us, but it also means that then we don't have the literacy issues that are there. If you know how to speak, you can quite quickly be able to use a voice-enabled device. It also has this level of inclusivity that goes beyond not just literacy, but also ability. And so it also then opens up a wealth of things.
So right now in the US, there's really two main players that we mostly focus on. Amazon and Google are really, in the smart speaker realm, the two predominant platforms that exist. There's a few others worth mentioning. You've got the Samsung Bixby, obviously Siri on iOS devices, and then Cortana, Microsoft. And really with Cortana, they're really focusing that assistant on more of the enterprise. So you're not hearing as much from them yet, but I know in the upcoming months we will. And obviously with Siri, it's been built into our iPhone and other iOS devices for a while. Right now, there's not a lot we can do from a development and creation standpoint. So certainly worth keeping an eye on what Apple's up to. Samsung has actually made a pretty big splash over the summer with a lot of developer outreach. And so they're actually becoming potentially the third major platform that we have to contend with. So the important thing to know is, like Chris said and Susan said, there's not only, the actions and skills and capsules and things like that. There's also web content that can actually be accessible here. And so that's really where we're going to be focusing most of our talk today. So here in the US, we're in the early majority phase of adoption. When you look at the adoption curve, the UK, Germany, Japan, Australia, Canada, they're about 9 months to a year behind. So I jokingly tell all of our European counterparts that, we'll make all the mistakes and just learn from the stuff that we do wrong, and then you'll be good to go. But really here in the States, we're firmly in that firmly in majority adoption. And when you look at what's happening from an adoption standpoint, smart speakers are actually being adopted faster than any other technology in human history. So from the advent of Alexa in 2014, you're really looking at about 5 years or so before we actually hit that magical 50% of the US population. When you look at smart speakers, it happened around 7 to 8 years. Television was about 12 years. So really, we're talking about this explosive growth for smart speakers specifically. And I think there's a few reasons. They're inexpensive. They're also easier to use in a lot of cases. And so you're seeing a lot of people starting with one and then kind of bunny rabbiting out from there. So in our house, we have both Google Home, Amazon Alexa, both speaker and screen versions. And we also have a HomePod. So it seems like you get one and then you kind of get a second one, you get a third one, and then before you know it, you have a whole family of these devices. So when you look at the amount of devices in home, depending on what report you read and what day of the week it is, we're anywhere between 80 million and about 130 million devices actually physically in homes right now. So that's not necessarily unique homes. It could be multiple devices in home. But the important thing to know is we're seeing this explosive growth in the adoption of these devices. And it's actually happening faster than we even expected. So on this chart right here, you actually can see they've had to revise the forecast because quite honestly, the numbers that when they come out, they're actually happening faster. So this is all really happening quite quickly, and it's very fluid.
And the interesting part of that, though, is while the consumer audience, as we've seen, there is a lot of adoption, business investment hasn't quite caught up yet. We've got some data here, but we've even anecdotally, investment is in the next 2 years is prevalent within the next year. And this was taken in 2018. That is, we're starting to hear the demand for it, but it is something important to realize is that there is a bit of a lag in between them. But interestingly enough, it is on the radar. And that is a difference that we've seen. And this is newer data that is showing that when looking at an emerging technology, voice is at the top of the forefront. Obviously, that works in hand with machine learning and AI, but to know that voice is still being something that's either starting to be used or anticipate using, that is showing at the forefront. Business is starting to catch up. The opportunity is definitely beginning to track. And so what does that mean to a marketer? What that means is that we are going through the technology shifts that come around every 10 to 15 years. During both Scott and mine's career, we've seen this happen from the dawn of the web, the dawn of social, and in the dawn of mobile. So we're going through this again. And the exciting thing is if you didn't catch up on the dawns before, this is an opportunity to do that. And this quote here is from one of the folks over at Amazon Pay Europe. And so it is that there is this belief that there is this new era, which is powered by voice, is going to have a major impact on commerce, but it's also going to have an impact on consumer behavior.
Yeah. And we're already starting to see that in search. So when you start to look at some of the data that's been out for the past couple of years, way back, 3 years ago in 2016, Google actually said that 20% of the searches that were actually happening within their app on Android was already voice, which is really pretty impressive considering it wasn't out super long. This next one absolutely blows me away, where 25% of searches on Windows 10 desktop are actually happening via voice. And so we're already starting to see some of that behavior that's started on the smartphone coming over to desktops. And we also now see that about 40% of Americans actually use voice search every single day. So it could be on your phone, it could be a smart speaker, it could be on your computer, but in some way, shape, or form, they're interacting with digital devices using their own voice. And it's really estimated that by next year, over 250 billion searches here in the US are actually going to be conducted via voice. So while that's about 15% or so of the overall search volume, as people buy these devices, and the prediction is next year where that 50% happens, that behavior is just going to only accelerate. So what does that mean for search? And so we're going to go kind of 50,000 foot view of voice and how it's going to impact search. Chris is going to get much, much deeper and have a lot of actionable things that you can start to do right now so that you can affect your content so you can actually start ranking for this content. The big thing to know is it's actually a mindset shift and a strategic shift from what we used to focus on keyword wise on the web to more of a longer phrase. So when we ask questions as humans, we don't just say car. I mean, that would be kind of weird. You walk up to someone and just say car and they have no idea what the hell you're talking about. Here it's, I want a red car, or I'm looking for a convertible around me. And so it's really important to know that you need to start having your content optimized for these longer tail, or what we refer to as long tail SEO. There's also other things like around me and how do I, and things like that when people are actually asking for these requests that naturally get tacked on to the beginning or ends. But the idea is you want to start having these longer phrases as something you rank for. Only a third of all websites on the internet right now are actually optimized for this. So first and foremost, that's something you're going to want to start to optimize for, because there's actually less competition. So you'll be able to rank quicker for it. But then as we move into more of a voice enabled future, you're going to have content that's already going to be optimized for that. So when we look at how voice search works on Alexa, there's also, this is also analogous on the Google platform, but specifically on Alexa, we know there's really three places that when you ask a question, it looks. So when you ask a basic question like what's the time, weather, things like that, it actually does its first search and it actually looks internally. So that's for more basic things. If it doesn't find the answer, then it quickly will look out to the second ring, which we're referring to as the voice web. And that's really anything that exists within the Alexa skill store. So third-party developers, creators have actually created, about 80,000, I think probably up to about 90,000 voice skills right now. And so what Alexa will do is say, hey, are there any skills out there that have this information? If it does, then it looks at ranking factors like, is it frequently used? Do people go back and repeat use? Traffic going to it? Is the content updated? And there's some known ranking factors. There's also a lot, quite frankly, that we don't know at this point because it is so new. But over time, this is your way to go through and start to outrank websites. The third place, and quite frankly, where a lot of the content you're seeing when you ask questions right now, it actually goes out to the web. On the Alexa side, it's actually using Bing as its search engine. And one of the important things to know is when you get a search result back, a lot of times you're actually seeing a Wikipedia entry. And this is something Chris is going to get a lot deeper into. But I think just for a moment, think about you've spent money building a brand and you've got, brand campaigns and your brand icon and all that stuff. And then when someone asks a question about your brand, Wikipedia is actually the source of the information. So that's a really important thing for brand managers, advertisers, marketers to understand right now, because there isn't a lot of content. Alexa and even Google to some extent is actually defaulting to Wikipedia, also Yelp and other places like that, because quite frankly, giving it some answer is better than giving no answer at all. So they're still trying to provide a good experience for their audience. But as content creators, it's critical to start thinking about how we can optimize our content for this. Because quite honestly, if you do this right, you're actually going to be investing in voice for your future. And so imagine a world where you have created a skill, and maybe you're a lawyer, maybe you're a charitable organization, whatever, and you've actually provided answers specifically about the industry. And so when people ask common questions over time, Alexa is going to go, well, this skill is being used quite a bit. There's a lot of people coming back to it. They've updated their content and it seems to be credible. When someone asks a question, I will surface this answer. And so in the scenario, it never goes out to the web. And quite frankly, if you're a number 2 or 3 player in the industry and you start to do this now, over time, you're going to actually unseat that incumbent, because right now there's only one answer to a question. You don't get a link, a page with a bunch of blue links on it. So this is incredibly important to understand. And it's also a very powerful thing to know, because if you don't act on it, your competitors probably are. And this is going to be a very hard proposition to overcome if you don't start investing right now.
Thanks, Scott and Susan, for laying out what is obviously a very compelling case for not only why voice is a big part of our future, but why it's important actually right now. So the goal of the second half of this presentation is to answer this question. How do we make sure our websites are optimized for voice assistants the way they are for Google.com? In other words, we can type a search request into the box in Google.com and optimize our websites to rank for a particular keyword. Ideally, have it land somewhere on Google's first page of search results. But what about voice search SEO? Do the same rules apply? Well, what we know is optimizing your content for the web is definitely the first step in optimizing for voice. I just want to take a real quick minute to take a step back and talk about web SEO just for a minute. And even if you know some things about web SEO, you might learn some things around these 3 main components, okay? On-page SEO is what we generally think about when we hear about search engine optimization. What's happening on a particular web page in relation to title tags and headers and the image alt tags, and how do they relate to the key phrase we're trying to optimize for. That's on page. Off page is what happens outside of your website. What backlinks to that page you want to optimize for are there? What sites are they pointed from? Are those sites more popular than your site? Could that increase your authority and your domain authority in Google's eyes because you have very popular sites pointing back to your site? And then thirdly, the technical side of it. And a lot of folks don't know how important this is to rank for web SEO. Page load time, how fast your website is. You can do on-page right and off-page right. But if your site is slow, or that web page you're trying to optimize for is slow, Google won't rank it. Their goal is to provide the best possible content, and that means the fastest possible content. If it's not mobile friendly, they won't rank it. If it's not HTTPS, in other words, that's what all of our websites should be now, secured, HTTPS. If you have an HTTP website, it's less likely to be secured as well. So again, there's a 2-pronged thing here happening now. We want to optimize our websites for search engine, but also it's critical that we do that so that we're found and recognized within the voice search realm, okay? So again, Scott and Susan mentioned that Google Assistant and Amazon Alexa are the 2 primary players. What they have in common is that they can be integrated. You don't need to just buy this Google Assistant device or this Amazon Alexa device to get these services, so to speak, okay? They can be integrated or embedded. I just bought a JBL Bluetooth speaker to play music from my phone, and it actually has Google Assistant built right in. You can buy a landline Motorola phone, put it on the counter of your kitchen, and have it also work with Alexa, so you can voice activate all elements of your phone. There are actually phone apps for Google Assistant and Amazon Alexa that you can download on your phone right now and turn your phone into an Alexa, okay? Now, they both do run on their own proprietary algorithms, of course, and that's where some differences come in, okay? We know Alexa by Amazon, of course, they're a little, they're most friendly around the consumer, product-based kinds of things. We also know there's a lot of cool skills that you can do with Amazon. It can turn on your lights, it can open your garage door, etc. But sort of more esoteric, long tail searches will not get the same results on Alexa as they would on Google, okay? Because if you think about it, Google has full access to all of their search indices, which is basically also the entire internet. So they're just more likely to return relevant results, as we'll see in a minute. So what better way to start this than to just go right into the wild and ask Google Assistant about the very topic of our webinar today. All right, let's hear it right from Google. Hey Google, how do you optimize for voice search?
Here's a summary from the website singlegrain.com. 5 ways to optimize your website for wearable tech and voice search. 1. Step 1. Get listed online. 2. Step 2. Reduce page loading time. 3. Step 3. Use long-tail SEO. 4. Step 4. Write more local content. And 5. Step 5. Use structured data markup.
All right. So that's pretty cool, right? Google found an answer to our question, and it came right from the internet, from a site called Single Grain. So let's take a look. Here's a look at the google.com search results page to see how it relates to our voice search result on the Google Assistant, okay? You can see how of almost 31 million results on google.com that we have one answer, and that is this web page from singlegrain.com. Google read off the list just as it appears here on the search results page. So Single Grain, they're sort of the lucky winner, so to speak, because the voice devices as a rule provide just one answer. We'll go into why this entry got chosen a bit later, but the takeaway from this is you get one answer to your question, and being highly optimized for web SEO gives you a great opportunity to be the chosen one for voice SEO. So let's see how Alexa responds to the same question.
Hey Alexa, how do you optimize for voice search?
Here's something I found on Wikipedia. Voice search, also called voice enabled, allows the user to use a voice command to search the internet, a website, or an app.
Okay, so wow, that was a very different answer. She told us right off the bat where she got the answer, not from some website like singlegrain.com, but Wikipedia. But that was the definition of voice search. It wasn't how to optimize. So that's a perfect example. Google gave us very relevant intentional information, 1 through 5 steps on how to do it. Alexa couldn't quite get there and just simply gave us the definition for voice search. And so it kind of shows what we already know, right? That Google Assistant's a little more web driven. It's much like a voice activated google.com or Alexa. And I mean, think about it. Amazon isn't a general search engine for the web like Google is. So Alexa defaults many times, as we've said, to the tried and true institutions like Wikipedia. Okay. Let's see what happens. Let's just keep it going here. And let's see what happens when we search for a very well-known person, Steve Jobs.
Hey Google, who is Steve Jobs? According to Wikipedia, Stephen Paul Jobs was an American business magnate, entrepreneur, and investor.
Wow. Okay. So that seemed like kind of a short response for who is Steve Jobs. So we're looking right now at the Google search results page for that query, who is Steve Jobs? And we can see where Google got its results. You can see it on the right. I highlighted it in green. Okay. But wait a minute, that's also from Wikipedia. So why did Google not use the #1 search result for who is Steve Jobs and instead used Wikipedia? Well, here's what we know. For popular people, places, and events, okay, both Google and Alexa tend to fall back to Wikipedia. And that makes sense in a way because it knows for you as a voice searcher that you're looking for the best possible information, the most thorough information. And so they default to Wikipedia. But we can see by the red arrow how biography.com got the actual #1 SEO spot. But Google defaulted to what was in the box on the right called the knowledge panel. Okay, and that knowledge panel is pulled from a data set that Google calls the knowledge graph. Sometimes you might hear people call this box on the right the knowledge graph. And as you've surely seen when you've searched on Google, you know the knowledge panel always pulls really the most popular and relevant results for a given topic. So Google Assistant's relying on the accuracy and relevance of that for its results too. So if after the webinar you go and ask Google Assistant, what is the Vietnam War, something big, right? Or what is Niagara Falls? And compare what it says on voice to google.com, you're going to see that it pulled it right from Wikipedia and right from the knowledge panel. So what does this mean for you? If you know you are currently ranking in a knowledge panel area for something at your company or your organization, whatever it might be, do some testing to see what voice query will trigger your result and see how it sounds. You might just be well on your way to a new marketing voice opportunity. Another big question, going back to something that Scott said, was, do you think that brands are aware that Wikipedia might be driving their voice marketing branding? It's a big question. It's definitely something for us that are on the line today to look into. So it's not going to be a surprise where Alexa gets her content and her answer for this same question, but there is something that's different. Let's take a listen.
Hey Alexa, who is Steve Jobs?
Stephen Paul Jobs was an American business magnate, entrepreneur, and investor. He was the chairman, chief executive officer, and co-founder of Apple Incorporated, the chairman and majority shareholder of Pixar, a member of the Walt Disney Company's board of directors following its acquisition of Pixar, and the founder, chairman, and CEO of Next.
Okay, so don't we think that Steve might like that response a little better? I mean, it didn't just say, like Google did, that he's a business magnate and investor. It gave us the whole story. But yeah, again, it's Wikipedia and it's a knowledge panel. You see it in green on the right. I've highlighted it. But there is one more thing to keep in mind. As Scott said, this is from Bing. This is not from Google. Alexa uses Bing. Okay. So keep in mind also that this knowledge panel on the right, whether it's Bing or it's Google, isn't just reserved for Wikipedia only, although you will see many, if not most or all, seemingly, knowledge panels have a Wikipedia entry of some kind. Actually, they also pull in information from various places too, like Yelp or a music destination or something like that, depending on who we're searching for, into that knowledge panel. So again, experiment, right? Figure out how your wiki entry, if you have one, is being read. Figure out if you have a knowledge panel or not around certain SEO terms, and see where that leaves you. And so now if we take another look here at this slide from Scott and Susan, it really makes sense, right? Alexa or Google, same thing really, is going out to the web because no one has made a skill, or in Google's case, an action, for the terms that we've been using. If there was a skill, it would have been the voice search result. So again, start doing some testing, see where keywords in your industry and for your company result, and see and think about if you want to optimize for voice search SEO, or in fact, you want to create a skill or an action. All right, so we've talked about a lot. Let's see what we know so far. Your content needs to be optimized for Google or Bing. We know that. Alexa and Google have different algorithms, yes. A lot of sources that the information can come from. We know, though, there's only one answer per question, and the answers themselves, even when pulled from the same source, can vary based on what device we're using, okay? And of course, obviously now, having some presence on mainstay sites, and it's not just Wikipedia, again, Yelp and wikidata.org, other websites out there also provide a lot of the core results and core data that these voice technologies are pulling from. All right, so let's keep going. So this kind of falls under the category of, okay, so Chris at Gulo, what are you guys doing with voice search SEO? How are you taking this on? So I'll take a quick step back and tell you a quick story, okay? Associations are one of our primary markets. So we do specific blog posts and write specific blog posts catered to them as an audience, okay? About, 4 or 6 weeks ago, I decided to write a blog post optimized for the key phrase SEO for associations, okay? And we worked really hard to write it so that it would rank on Google, that Google would like it. And as time went by, it actually started climbing the rankings, and eventually we were super excited. It got to #1 as a Google search. And I thought, okay, I think then this means that Google Assistant should notice it and find it. And that should be the voice search result if I ask Google, hey Google, what is SEO for associations? Okay, so let's ask right now and see what happens when we search or ask Google Assistant, what is SEO for associations?
Hey Google, what is SEO for associations? On the website gulosolutions.com, they say, SEO for associations is a major part of a well-rounded digital marketing strategy that can enhance your authority in your industry, lead to better content, and rank you for keywords that matter.
Okay, so that's pretty cool. Pulled it right off our website, gulosolutions.com. But there's a little secret to how and why that happened. Okay. So before I get into that, I do want to take just a quick step back and just mention something that I think is probably obvious, but voice works best usually in a more conversational mode. The way we say it should be maybe the way we write it on our websites. Okay. We tend to ask smart speakers questions. What's the weather? Where's a restaurant? We tend to, not always, but we tend to use a more keyword focused approach on google.com. Not exclusively, obviously, we do definitely type questions into Google, but something like SEO for associations, okay? We anticipate for the website of things that people are going, if you're an association, you want to know about SEO, you're going to type in SEO for associations, okay? Same with Steve Jobs. We might just type Steve Jobs into Google instead of who is Steve Jobs, okay? The good news, as you can see here, is that the Google algorithm understands what you're going for, so no matter how you type it. I mean, obviously there's parameters around that, but a search for what is SEO for associations or a search for just SEO for associations yields the same result. That's really the point. It's not to say you shouldn't write more conversationally, though. Obviously, you should when it comes to voice, but there is some forgiveness in the system, at least for now. But as competition tightens up, I definitely think that could change. Okay. In fact, there's a term right now that's going around that Google is not a search engine, but it's becoming an answer engine. And I think that pretty much sums it up. So let's look at why Google Assistant is providing this voice search result when actually it didn't before. When we were ranked as just the #1 result, Google Assistant didn't find our blog post. It wasn't until, okay, we became what you're looking at here, this box that you see, I'm sure I've seen many times at the top of a search results page. It's called a featured snippet. And what we know is Google search results like featured snippets. So being #1 in a search result wasn't enough. It wasn't until we converted, and now we didn't do this, Google.com made the decision to do this to our listing, and they converted us to a featured snippet. Okay. And it wasn't until that happened that we became part of the voice search results ecosystem. So what we know is that the knowledge panel and featured snippets both are primary drivers for voice search results. So good news, if you're out there and you know you have some featured snippets, you may be in line for the one and only voice search result around a certain keyword, okay? A report by a company called Backlinko recently stated that over 40% of voice search results come from featured snippets. You couple that with the knowledge panel and you can see why a large percentage of voice search results are coming from those two areas. And just as a side note, you can see that Google Assistant spoke the words immediately after the first instance of the key phrase, SEO for associations. It didn't speak any of the words before, okay? Again, just something to keep in mind as you optimize your pages. Now, as for Alexa, if you ask, what is SEO for associations? She says, sorry, I don't know that one. And even though we at Gulo Solutions hold an equivalent featured snippet type of posting for this keyword on Bing, we don't get the voice search result from Alexa. Again, different algorithms and different priorities. Now, I can also hear you asking, well, Chris, how do we get to be a featured snippet if we aren't already? Well, that's actually another webinar probably around SEO and featured snippets, but there are some, you can Google it quite easily, but there are some factors like how you use the H2 tag. If you're going to use, see, we have 7 advantages. They like numbers. They like your solutions across from each number to be short, few words. If you remember singlegrain.com, they listed off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but they were all short explanations that the Google voice search could latch onto and easily tell us about. Just a quick screenshot of our actual blog page so you can see where on the actual web page the Google featured snippet pulled our information from, and very common to pull it right from the first paragraph. Another thing that helps you get featured as a featured snippet is if your first paragraph is fewer than 50 words. So keep that in mind as well. Now, being from Chicago, pizza is a big deal here, right? There's pizza wars all the time. Who makes the best pizza? My favorite is Lou Malnati's pizza. And so let me see, let's take this a next step further. Let me see if Google can answer if Lou Malnati's is the best pizza in Chicago. Let's take a listen.
Hey Google, is Lou Malnati's the best pizza in Chicago?
On the website lumalnati's.com, they say, Chicago's best deep dish since 1971. He took his pizza expertise to Lincolnwood, a northern suburb of Chicago, where he and his wife Jean opened the first Lou Malnati's Pizzeria on March 17, 1971.
Okay. Did it answer the question? I mean, not exactly, but it did come off of the lumalnati's.com website. So voice search SEO optimization is sort of maybe even just in a de facto way has happened here. Okay. Again, are they a featured snippet? Yes, they are. But this is also an example of long tail key phrases as well. Okay, typing in, is Lou Malnati's the best pizza in Chicago, or asking that, saying, that's an example of long tail. Okay. Now, the good news is the copy that they've pulled here in their featured snippet is right off their homepage. All right. But the question is, did the Lou Malnati's marketing team plan for this? You know, it doesn't seem like it, because the copy that was read was, he took his pizza expertise to Lincolnwood. That's not really answering the actual question. Okay, so good news is lumalnati's.com is acknowledged and optimized for this question. The average news is the actual response isn't as great as it could be. So if anybody knows anyone at Malnati's, let them know this. And if it happens to something that you're doing, what would we do here? Well, we could help change the copy on the homepage to see if not only do we continue to rank for this long tail keyword, but if it tells and speaks to more prevalent and relevant copy. So that was a lot on voice SEO, okay? And let's see what else we know at this point, okay? Voice works best in the form of a question. You should write, therefore, conversationally to rank better for voice. Clearly, Google and Alexa both decide what words to say and not to say from the particular copy. And we just talked about it, the long tail key phrases, okay? Relevancy and intention of the end user is key, and we get that with long tail. Now, what are the very next steps that you could take? Well, learning the ins and outs of web SEO is critical. If you're not doing SEO, you can see why it's important that you do just from a website perspective. But now the added bonus is that you want to be represented in voice search accurately as well. So SEO isn't an option anymore. If you thought it was, it's not. Of course, do some homework on voice marketing. It's always changing. I will provide at the end a link to a blog post that will tell you more as a complement, will tell you to this webinar. It's a complement to this webinar that will tell you even more about voice search. Obviously, we talked about experimenting and rewriting or optimizing your pages, and maybe you need to talk to Scott or Susan about what it would take to build a skill. So again, Gulo, the kind of things we do is help optimize your website and your web page, like Lou Malnati's, right? To say, how can we do this better? And that's a critical piece to your website. Having a strategy, a voice strategy with skills and actions, that's when you would talk to Scott and Susan. And again, like any good technology, you want to take these and rinse and repeat. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Scott and Susan to tell you about this this giveaway that they had for the webinar.
Sure. So as a thank you to everyone who's stuck with us through our technical difficulties and such, what we have offered up is to put this presentation together, and actually several others, Scott and I have done quite a bit of compiling of different research, stats, and things that are needed, not just to build the business case of why you want to look into voice, but also voice assistant usage and such. So we've compiled that into an updated stat book. The last one we had had been updated in July, and this now represents new information that's come out since then. So you can pull this from right there. It'll be a PDF, and you can use all of the charts as long as you make sure that you are crediting and attributing sources correctly.
Awesome. Yeah, and I can speak to this personally because I've had downloaded this, and I used it for this presentation. I've used it for a blog post I've written. It's just really great information. If you need to move this up the ladder at your organization, the idea of voice search, this is a great place to start. Check out this stat book, get the stats, present the case. Everything you need to know is in here. So a couple things here as we wrap up, and we want to maybe make some time for some questions. A couple things about Gulo. If you ask Alexa who is Gulo Solutions, you will get a response from the website Crunchbase. And so you can sort of test that out with your companies if that's not something you've done before. If you ask Google, Google tends to want to tell you where we're located, when we're open, how to get there, that kind of thing. I also said that on our blog, which is at gulosolutions.com/blog, you'll find, if you go there, you will find a blog post about voice search SEO. That is a real complement to what's on the webinar. Some of the same things are covered, but there's a lot of other stuff there. So couple that with the stat book, and you can really build a pretty compelling case. And of course, my contact information is here below. So Scott and Susan, did you want to say anything else before we went in and looked at the questions and see if we can answer any?
Yeah, if you have any general voice strategy questions, we do have an Alexa skill. So if you say launch voice facts, you can actually get some answers to common questions that we've received talking to brand managers and other folks like that. We also do weigh in on the Chicago style pizza wars. And an Easter egg, we did notice there was quite a bit of search volume around, or questions around pizza. So, check it out and see what our take on it is.